Welcome to Mom Alternative, where we have sensible reactions to modern day problems around relationships and motherhood. Amongst other things, today we'll cover flipping out at your mother-in-law for daring to take your child for a walk, calling an L&D unit, a labor and delivery unit, and getting embarrassed by it, and feeling insanely jealous of your sister and how to navigate that. Our first thread is titled, Am I Wrong for Being Angry? OP says, mother-in-law came to visit with our baby and asked if she could take her for a walk. I've never let anybody take her anywhere without me present, but I've been trying to get more comfortable with it, so I agreed to let her. She said she'd just take her to the mailbox and back, which isn't more than 20 feet from our house. Well, 10 minutes had passed and they still went back, so I looked outside and didn't see them anywhere. I immediately panicked, thinking something had happened after 20 minutes of them not returning. I was calling her, but she left her phone in the house. She finally gets back with her nearly half an hour later and is acting like it's not a big deal. If she had told me they would be walking far, I'd understand, but she literally assured me they were just going up the street. For it being my first time allowing someone to take my child, of course I was anxious, and even more so when they weren't where she said they would be. Am I wrong for being angry at mother-in-law for this? Now, I think this is completely over the top. I think this is way overblown as a reaction, and it doesn't have to be this way. I do think OP is wrong for being angry. There's just a huge difference to me from taking a child out for an hour versus taking a child out for 20-25 minutes. I don't think that the difference between 20-25 minutes and the amount that she expected them to be out, which is like 5-10 minutes, I guess, is such a huge difference. I mean, you can spend 10 minutes just talking to your neighbor if you come across a neighbor, or maybe, there's a dog walking by and your child just wants to hang out and watch the dog. I know that we don't really know exactly how old the child is in this situation, but it just seems like such a reasonable amount of time to be outside that I cannot imagine freaking out to this extent. Now, it's also not the case that she's left her with someone who she doesn't know, who she doesn't trust, who hasn't spent time with the kid before. Like, it's her mother-in-law, it's a member of the family. So reacting this extremely and having this level of anxiety with it is just not healthy. And I think OP makes that very clear when she says, hey, I have never let anybody take her anywhere without me present. And then she also says, this being my first time, I was already anxious. So it seems to me like OP already started at a pretty high level of anxiety, and then 5 minutes later, her anxiety level was all the way up here, which is completely unnecessary and way over the top. And I don't know why you would do this to yourself, and I don't know why you would treat your child or your mother-in-law like this. When she says, hey, after 10 minutes, she looked outside and she didn't see them anywhere, and then she immediately panicked thinking the worst had happened, I kind of would maybe understand this a little bit if she lived in the middle of a city, if there were, giant cars in front of the house driving super fast all the time. If there was any reason to say, hey, if my child is out for even 5 minutes longer than I would expect her to be, then there's likely to be a problem and I need to go find out what's going on. I also think the point of, hey, the mother-in-law left her phone behind, and that being then the big problem because you can't get in touch with her. Well, if the mother-in-law was expecting to be out for a few minutes, then it also makes sense to me that she wouldn't necessarily have her phone with her. So as far as I can tell, this is way over the top as a reaction. I would kind of get it if the kid was out for an hour and you didn't expect them to be out for an hour. That's pretty much the only circumstance in which this type of response would make sense to me. That said, I'm pretty much the only person that feels this way. You can see some of the comments. The first person says, you are not wrong for feeling that way. That would be the last time she did anything with the baby. She lied to you and took your baby. I would be angry too. And the thing about this response that really stands out to me is that there's this kind of attitude towards it as if the mother-in-law kidnapped the child, because she took her out for a 20-minute walk, which is just, I don't even know why you would frame it in that way at all. Also, the point where she says, hey, this would be the last time she did anything with the baby, such an extreme reaction. She didn't do anything to hurt her. She didn't harm her in any way. She didn't overstep a major boundary that really changed how she interacts with your child in a way that's super unhealthy and harmful for her. She did not. She took her outside. She made her spend some time outside. That's all she did. Next person says, absolutely not. She lied and didn't take her phone. I would be furious. I kind of get the point a little bit of it being a lie in terms of, okay, she said, hey, we're just going to the mailbox and coming back. But also if spontaneously she's like, hey, the kid is having fun and she seems to, maybe she needs to breathe some fresh air. She spends a bit too long outside. So she's like, okay, we'll take a quick loop around the block. Then that's completely reasonable. Like she didn't do anything that was totally out there. This person asked a bunch of questions about what the baby was doing and where they went, and OP replies with this description, which I thought was actually quite hilarious. She says, her baby does very well on short walks, but not longer than 15 minutes. When they got back, she was covered in sweat and her poor little cheeks were so flushed. It's extremely hot where we live, so had I known it would be a long walk, I would have had mother-in-law bring water and sunscreen. So, OP here, I'm assuming she exaggerates a little bit when she says almost half an hour later. I'm pretty sure that means like 20-25 minutes later, they came back. And so the difference between 15 minutes and 20-25 minutes is not that long. You can argue it's long for a child. Okay, fair enough. But the idea that she was covered in sweat and a little bit, she had like flushed cheeks. She did a tiny little bit of exercise for her tiny little body. That was all that happened. She also says it's extremely hot. You know what? People have survived without sunscreen for a very, very long time. It's not that you spend 5 minutes out in the sun and then suddenly your skin is like totally burnt and you get cancer. That's not how this works. That she was out for 25 minutes is not harmful for the child. She will recover, okay? She's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. You don't need to freak out to this point. And then the next comment says, I'd be upset too. You have every right to be upset when someone doesn't do what they say regarding your child. I would have gone looking for them. And OP replies, I was cooking dinner, so I couldn't leave the stove, but my husband did go out looking. She took her all the way around. So by the time he'd got around the neighborhood, she was back. I can just imagine the husband actually being pretty chill and calm and relaxed about the whole thing, going, yeah, okay, I'll go look for them, while his wife is going a bit insane in front of the dishes. And then just it not panning out. Like a little loop around the block is, I'm sorry, it's not that dangerous. I would hope you don't live somewhere that's so dangerous that you're like, okay, my child is outside for 5 minutes and she's going to die. That's probably not good. Next person says, I absolutely hate not knowing where my child is. My in-laws pulled that crap once and have never babysat since. As mum, I need to know where my child is. Which is fair enough as a general statement. Yes, you do need to know where your child is, but this is the type of event and the type of circumstance and the amount of time that is just these are all the factors that make this type of reaction seem so completely extreme to me. If she took her out for an hour, if they went somewhere to the center of the city, if they went shopping together, if they went to an actual place where you couldn't find them and you couldn't get in touch with her, and they hadn't, had a conversation with you about just going outside for a few minutes, then okay, fair enough. But those all need to be there. In this case, she was literally outside for 20 minutes. Like 20 minutes, come on. And then OP replies, it's the worst feeling, especially for me as a new mom, and having had such bad anxiety, I was already so anxious just to let her walk to the mailbox. Now, if the mailbox is literally 20 feet away from them, that's probably the kind of distance that I would be comfortable with my child walking by themselves, so long as I could see them from a window somewhere. That's literally so close that to be anxious about it makes it clear that you're the person with the problem and it's really not the mother-in-law in this case. This is a perfect situation where parents, mothers especially, just go completely overboard. And I'm assuming that this person is a first-time mom, because I think most people calm down a bit by the time they have a second or a third child. But yeah, totally unnecessary. I'm sorry that you freaked out so much, OP. I'm sorry that you seem to have such little trust in her grandmother, in your child's grandmother, and assume that she would, I don't know, just not look after her for any reasonable period of time, even if it's just 20 minutes. In general, I would probably say you should be grateful that your mother-in-law wanted to take your child outside, because it's good for them to spend some time outside. And it's pretty great that she had some exercise, that she got a little bit hot, she got to experience what that felt like. I would be grateful. Our next thread is titled Called L&D and they said that they're not an advice line. So L&D is short for labor and delivery. OP says, I see all the comments about, oh, call L&D triage and see what they say. So I called, explained my concerns, and asked if I should go in. She interrupted me as I was explaining and said, I don't know what to tell you. We're not an advice line. Then she hung up. Definitely felt stupid for even calling. And then she adds an edit. She says, my OB has her own private practice. There's no after hours emergency number to call. So us patients are advised to call L&D if we have any concerns outside of their normal hours. Now, this is very much an American thing, and I don't know the system in the US well enough to be able to really make a comment about how reasonable this is or not. What I do find a little bit hilarious is this idea that if you experience anything during your pregnancy that you're a little bit like, I'm not sure, then your first response should be call a hospital line and ask for advice. Now, to me, it makes no sense to talk to a random stranger who knows nothing about you, who has no idea what your history is, who doesn't know your name, who doesn't have your medical records, who just, they have nothing to do with you. They're just there to run a hospital and respond to patients inside the hospital. To call them up and be like, hey, I'm experiencing A, B, C, D types of symptoms. Is this like a problem? Should I come in? Like, can you check out and check that my baby's doing okay? Completely over the top. I kind of feel a little bit bad for her that the person replied, hey, we're not an advice line. But also, you'll notice that there's zero context here from OP about what the question that she was actually asking was. And I bet you anything, it was a pretty ridiculous question. I'm pretty sure that she got this kind of response because she asked something that's so banal and so trivial that the woman on the other line, the woman on the other line was kind of like, I don't know what you want from me, man. This is a bit strange. So that's how I feel about this one. I think that if you experience actual serious problems during your pregnancy and you're close to, you have some reason to really believe that there's an actual issue, then I would probably go into the hospital and ask for treatment. That's like, if it's not serious enough for that, then it can probably wait for you to call your doctor and say, hey, I need some advice about this situation. But I do think that it would be irresponsible and borderline dangerous for any old nurse to be hanging out in front of a phone and say, this is what you should be doing, when she doesn't know anything about your particular individual circumstances. And the idea that, medical advice can be given willy-nilly like that is just not a good one. It's not a good attitude. It's not a good habit for people to get into, or an expectation for people to have. Now you'll see, again, I'm pretty much the only person that has this response to it. The first comment says, that's incredibly rude. I'm shocked they replied that way to you. I've always been told to call L&D if I have a concern or if I feel like I need to come in and get checked out. You definitely were not in the wrong by calling them. I mean, I think it's sad, I guess, that they made her feel embarrassed and a little bit stupid and humiliated. But, sometimes you make mistakes like that are really visible in front of someone else. And then it's just a little bit embarrassing in and of itself. Like I said, I can't comment on the situation in the US and the system there. To what extent is it normal for hospitals to get random phone calls? But I do think that there is something weird about this being such a widespread piece of advice on this kind of forum, where pretty much everyone says, yeah, you just call them up and they're gonna help you out. Like, maybe they're helping you out of charity and out of goodwill more than them helping you out because it's actually right for them to do so in that moment in time. And another comment says, that's super rude. My L&D department is always so helpful. I'm really sorry that was your experience. I would let your OB know. I find that so strange because my OB's office doesn't take questions by phone at all. I'm to call L&D for advice, and if needed, they contact the OB on call. If you called the nurse's name, I would definitely remember it for when you gave birth. Remember that you can fire your nurse. I wouldn't want her attitude while giving birth. Which, I mean, fair enough, yeah, you do want to be comfortable with the nurses around you, but honestly, it's just so extreme. And this is also really strange advice to me, like if your doctor knows your case a lot better, but they're like, hey, we don't answer anything by phone, why would they expect the hospital to answer things by phone? I don't. Logically, it does not make sense to me. Next person also says, that was very rude. You can report the person. L&D personnel is supposed to help with any questions or concerns that you may have. Do not feel stupid for calling. And she gets a reply from someone else that says it could be very dangerous if this is not investigated. Now, again, these are people who make these assumptions without knowing what the hospital's policies are, without knowing why the person said this, without knowing what kind of question was asked for her to feel like, hey, you know, we're not here to just give you random advice. Like, I can imagine so many questions that could come up, ranging from, hey, is it okay that I ate bacon? To, you know, I'm feeling a little bit, some light contractions every now and then. Is that a problem? Should I come in? People are just really insane when they're pregnant. Sometimes some people are very insane when they're pregnant. And then this person replies, hey, I would get a name and file a complaint. I have a feeling that you spoke with a front desk person. Yeah, and people kind of egg her on and say, yeah, this is very inappropriate. Someone does actually make the comment that I kind of want to make here, which is L&D can't really advise you on what to do. My OB has an after-hours emergency line to call for all questions, as they're really the only ones who can give medical advice. Still, you shouldn't have been treated that way, and that L&D unit may need some education on how to talk to patients. And that's kind of the fundamental crux of it. I don't think you can expect random people to give you advice at random. Like, that's not a healthy expectation for you to have. And if they were to give you advice, honestly, for me, I would be very skeptical, because for them to give me advice in that type of setting would mean that they don't really care about the advice that they're giving, that this is just something standard that they say across the board for everyone. So yeah, you know what, maybe we'll at some point we'll find out what type of question she asked. She doesn't say in any of the comments what question she asked to get this type of response for it, but I would somehow give the hospital the benefit of the doubt here, even though I'm not a fan of hospitals. But you know what, people get really stressed out. And our next one is titled Insanely Jealous of My Sister. I'm going to skip the update and get back to it. She says her sister, she has my mum as full-time care, 9 to 6, 5 days a week for her 2 kids. My mum only sees my kid when my sister is busy, and we all have to pretend that my sister watches her kids full-time so her husband doesn't find out she's home alone all day. I know I'm wrong. I know they obviously have an arrangement and it's none of my business. My mom and sister are both nice people. They aren't doing anything wrong. My mom is always acting like we can call her anytime to help, but really it's just whenever my sister says it's okay. I took my son to my mom's house to see his cousins yesterday, and my sister dropped in to say hi. She had just had her hair and nails done and was coming from lunch with a friend and was about to go shopping. When I got home, I could barely contain my tears as I put my sweet little guy down for his nap. I'm so tired. My hair is full of grays and still crazy postpartum. My skin is a wreck. I feel disgusting and I miss doing things alone. I am just so straight up jealous of her free time. I almost burn with rage just thinking about it. Anyway, I have nowhere else to make this shameful confession, so thank you for listening. Now, OP... at least she understands that this is a shameful confession, and that's kind of why she's putting it out into the world in this type of format. What I find, you know, sometimes jealousy is just a really evil emotion. This thing that you do where you look at other people in your life, especially other family members, and they have these periods of time, or they have these things going on, maybe, material goods or items, just whatever is going on in their life that makes you look at them and go, man, I really, really, really want that, and then get super angry about it. It's a really sad way to live. It's a very sad way to live. There are so many other scenarios and situations and ways of looking at this particular circumstance, and you could treat it totally differently. So as an example, you could say, hey, you know what, maybe this is a sign that I'm really overworked, that I'm extremely tired, that I need a little bit of a break. What could I do to change this for myself? Could I ask my mom for a little bit more help? Like, maybe if she's up for helping my sister out, she'll also be up for taking my kid for a couple of hours so I can go out and do some other things. Maybe I need to look into some other childcare option. Maybe there's something about my life fundamentally that I'm not happy with. And that's what I should be trying to change. And the fact that it manifests itself in this type of anger and rage and jealousy towards my sister, who I say myself is a really great person, maybe that's the problem. And that's what I should be working on. So yeah, this is a real shame for OP. I cannot relate at all. I I do think there is a little bit of a dig here where she says, we all have to pretend that my sister watches her kids full time so her husband doesn't find out she's home alone all day. That sounds a little bit wrong and unhealthy. I would not be complicit in lying to her husband with regards to her kids. But the rest of it, honestly, it still sounds to me like it's just a bit of resentment that's coming out there. And that's why she says it in this kind of way. I'm not sure I'm buying that, you know, her husband comes home from work and he finds out, or he can see that her sister got her hair done, her nails done. You know, I'm pretty sure, like, yeah, okay, a lot of people will say that guys aren't that observant, but I'm pretty sure you would notice it's definitely hard to miss the nails. They also tend to smell a bit and so on. So I'm not buying that he has zero idea that his wife is going out and doing some other things. Like somehow that doesn't make sense to me. But under those circumstances, I'd probably sit down with my sister and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe you should like talk to him about this. And I wouldn't be complicit in lying about it. And I don't think you need to be complicit in lying about it. She's not doing anything wrong fundamentally. That said, that when she says, when I got home, I could barely contain my tears. Like, honestly, this is such a terrible level of jealousy to have and such a terrible level of anger to hold in your heart towards your mum and your sister. And clearly it's coming from you not being very satisfied with your lot in life right now, with feeling, with struggling as a new mum. And the time that you have to spend with your son. So maybe that's really the thing that you should work on. So if I were OP here, I would have noticed that, hey, I'm not doing very well and I need some help. And how can I get help? And then that's a conversation that I would have with my husband and try to figure it out from there. And you can see some of the comments. Everyone really picks up on this thing about the husband of the sister not knowing. So this person says her husband doesn't know that she takes the kids to her mom full time. That is crazy ridiculous to me. I'm all about parents needing a break, but that's not a break. It sounds like her mom gets more direct time with her kids than she does. I would be upset too. And you don't want to just take your kid with your mom and overload your mom with children. I mean, again, if you just ask and her mom is like, yeah, sure, then I don't think that would be overloading her with children. Comment continues, starting August, my mom will be watching my infant full-time because both my husband and I work full-time. She's actually just bought a house closer to us to be able to do this. I'm an only child. I have no doubt my kids and I will be spending a lot of time at her house, but it will be so we can all spend time together. Do you think it's possible to ask your mom if you could take your baby over like every other Friday? Exactly. That's a pretty reasonable way to respond. You know, if your mom is happy to provide childcare for your sister, then chances are she will be happy to provide childcare for you as well because she just likes spending time with her grandkids. And that's completely reasonable. Then the next comment here says, do your sister's kids talk? Are they, your sister and mom, grooming your nieces and nephews to lie to their father? You're not wrong for being resentful, but I honestly see so much more wrong with this whole picture. I would be wary of leaving my child with my mom. In this case, your mom is helping your sister lie to her husband and her children are watching. Would it be at all possible for you to get your son into a daycare center situation part-time, even 2 days a week? That would give you something of a break to catch your breath. I'm so sorry it's so hard. Being a mom is insanely hard, especially when you see such an imbalance. But to be really honest, I'd have a hard time leaving my child with a known liar, even if that liar was my mom. I mean, fair enough. That's definitely a valid criticism, but clearly it's not where OP is coming from. OP is coming from the angle of, man, I just need some time by myself. I wish I could have a similar arrangement with my mom, or at least something approximating a childcare arrangement with her, that I was not so tied to my child 100% of the time and I would get just a little bit of time by myself. I think that that's OP's angle here. I do think it's a little bit toxic. Like, I don't know how old the kids are. And yes, again, the lying situation is a little bit dodgy. I'll read one final comment here. She says, I'm envious of your sister too. I have 2 littles and operate a business and I'm so busy. My eyebrows are so crooked right now, but I don't have time to get them done. I feel you. We do have to somehow carve out some time for ourselves. If your mom can't do it, get a babysitter. And I just found this statement, my eyebrows are so crooked right now, but I don't have time to get them done. Such a perfect, like it just encapsulates the struggle of new time, of new parents so well that I thought it was very amusing. Now I will get back and read to you the update, which I thought was hilarious, just like the cherry on top with this particular situation. She says, update, my brother-in-law found out because he came home for lunch unexpectedly and found the house empty when my sister was supposed to be home with the kids. And guess what? Now my mom is watching the kids all day, weekends and evenings too. He is thrilled to find out he has full-time care for free. My sister and him went out to dinner 5 nights straight, and they're talking about having another baby. And so OP has a couple of like cry emojis here. Honestly, I think that it is very, 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 very clear that her mother-in-law is happy to look after her grandchildren. Now, obviously, the explanation here, again, I really feel that this is the resentment coming through from OP's side. And that's why she couches it in these terms. And when she says now she's watching the kids all day, on weekends and evenings too, that gives you the impression that, hey, it's like the kids moved in full time with the mother-in-law. And maybe that is the case. Honestly, if you as parents decide to do that and the mother-in-law is happy, the kids are happy, the parents are happy, and this is an arrangement that works out for everyone, then fair enough. I guess, people can choose to do that. I think it's great when kids have such great relationships with their grandparents. That said, the level of jealousy here is really, really intense, and probably the sister knew that her husband wouldn't have a problem with it. Therefore, when he found out, it also wasn't a big deal. There's so much negativity that's pushed in here from OP's side. And honestly, OP, I think it's a very, very, very clear sign that you just need some time for yourself. And you need to figure out a way to make that happen. And whether that's through a babysitter, whether that's through asking your mom for some more help, however you want to do that. But when you have so much negativity towards the people in your life, towards your family members, and you're trying to bitch about them on a forum like this and make them out to be some evil people who are not interested in properly parenting their kids, then you are the problem. Then you are really, really suffering and you're in a really bad place, and you should change that for yourself. And so the summary of this one is trying not to be jealous, like at least take jealousy as a sign that there's something about your life that you need to change. Because if you're jealous of other people for the things that they have for themselves, then that probably means that there's something about your life that you are not happy with. And that is all you can do. You can just change your life to make it suit whatever you need in order to be in a better place. And now we come to this one, which is titled Husband Vent. She says, I'm a stay-at-home mom and my husband has a pretty flexible schedule. I do all the housework unless I specifically ask him to do something, and he does it without hesitation. He's been helping out a lot with our toddler and changes our baby's diapers when needed. She's exclusively breastfed, so he can't really do much more than that. Tonight, he asked me if he could go to the bar for a drink. I said no. I didn't really have a reason other than our baby is 8 days old and I think it's ridiculous. He went to his mom's to get food that she had made for us and went to the bar. He texted me when he was there. He wasn't there long, so he probably had one drink. Still, I'm so angry. I specifically said no, and he did it anyways. He said I didn't really give a reason, so he thought I was being unreasonable. He also said that both girls were sleeping, so I didn't need help at the time. This is true. Am I being ridiculous for being upset? I don't even want to talk to him and just want to pack up both children tomorrow and go to my mom's for the day to get away from him. I want to rule out if I have a reason to be upset or if it's my hormones. Today we are just surrounded by totally unreasonable people. So I think OP is completely unreasonable. I do think it's a little bit of a hormonal reaction, but you know what? Maybe she's angry for other reasons. Generally, the moment that you say, hey, like in general, the fact that he asked means that he was being super polite. I wouldn't phrase it as a question. If I really wanted to go somewhere, I would probably say something like, hey, I'd really like to do X. Would that be okay with you? And that's kind of already going above and beyond. And to get a response from my spouse where I feel like he doesn't give a crap about me wanting to do X and he's just like, no, for no reason. And she says herself, I had no reason other than the baby is only 8 days old and she thinks it's ridiculous that he has the thought of wanting to go out and do something. Clearly that came through. Clearly he felt, hey, She has no reason to be against this. She's just saying no for the sake of it. Maybe she's just being angry and venting. And he was like, you know what, whatever. 8 days after the birth of a child seems like a reasonable amount of time for me if he wants to meet up with some friends, for them to say, hey, congrats. How is it? How are you doing? And when she also says herself that he wasn't there for very long, he is a great dad. He helps out without hesitation whenever she asks him to do anything. Like, she has no reason to be angry and annoyed at him, and there's just nothing in the picture here. Also, the fact that both babies, or both of their kids, were asleep at the time. So, like, he knew that they were asleep. He knew that it was fine. He knew that it was okay. And then he was like, all right, I'm just going to take like half an hour out and go to the bar, have one drink, meet up with some people, and then I'm going to come straight back home. So clearly he went out of his way to to just be a considerate partner, to be there for her, to help her out, to make sure that he was not prioritizing his drinking over the kids or looking after the kids or over her and being able to help her. And so there's absolutely no reason to look at this situation and be like, hey, you're being totally unreasonable by wanting to go out somewhere. Like, that's just, there's nothing here that implies that. So yes, I think that she is being unreasonable. If I were her, I would probably take the fact that, like, she kind of rationalizes it all for herself already in the thread, you know, and she's trying to be like, no, I think it's ridiculous, but she understands completely why he reacted in the way that he did, and she definitely has an inkling that she's being unreasonable about it. You can see here the comments are kind of in the middle. First person says, you're not being ridiculous for being upset because he didn't communicate that he was going to go anyway. I'd be upset with my husband too. But it's also valid that he feels upset if he doesn't feel like a good reason was given for your terms, even if it feels like it should be obvious. I'd say it's just a communication issue. All feelings are valid here, but definitely talk about it when you both feel calm. Now, yeah, but I wouldn't consider it to be lying. If I said no and my husband was like, well, okay, no, okay. I would be annoyed, but I would be annoyed knowing that I was kind of being bitchy the first time round, and then he's calling me out on it. That's how I would feel. If my husband decided to go along and do something after I was like, no, please don't do that, then we would probably fight about it. But I would also understand that, number one, me saying no for no reason is kind of asking for it. And number two, if I was not so bitchy, he would have told me in a different way. And so it's my fault, you know, for asking for it. Next person says, yeah, no, my husband ain't going to no effing bar if my baby's 8 days old. And someone replies to this, ditto this, I'd pack a bag and tell him to go stay elsewhere if he thinks that that's appropriate. If he wanted a drink, he can drink at home. He's not breastfeeding a fresh little baby. If it were 8 weeks postpartum, then fine, go to a bar for a bit, whatever. But 8 days? No. This is I don't know what it is about people that they get so much glee and joy from watching relationships fall apart over things that are completely ridiculous and unnecessary. This is such a perfect example of, like, this does not matter. The fact that it even occurred to her to say, hey, I want to pack up a bag and take both children away from my husband, who is a great father, who helps me out all the time, who listens to me, who's considerate of my needs, who even thought, hey, the kids are asleep, so I'm not needed right now, that he even had that thought before making a decision, who asks me before he wants to go somewhere, but expects that I will also extend him the courtesy of being a reasonable person. I will take my kids away from that type of father and run away to my mom's because of this type of ridiculously small, tiny scenario and situation. It's so bad. It's awful. It's such a terrible attitude. It's such a terrible perspective. It's such a harmful one. And the outcome is just families that are broken for absolutely no reason. So no, both of these comments are just terrible. Terrible. And then next person reply, or one of the next comments is from this person. She says, my husband did something similar when baby was 8 days old. He asked to go to a movie after our toddler was asleep at night. At first, I was so mad that he would even think going out was okay. But when I was honest with myself, I realized that the reason I was mad was because I couldn't go. And it seemed so unfair to me that he could even consider leaving. I said yes once I realized that the only reason for no was that I was jealous that he could just go live his normal life. I was mad the whole time he was gone, don't get me wrong, but it was more mad at the situation than actually mad at him. And that really highlights to me how much of being a mother, especially a breastfeeding mom, especially in those very first days after having a baby, is connected with this vitriol and anger and frustration at your life circumstances just being different. That now you have something else to consider that you didn't have to consider before. This idea that you're chained to your house or to your home or to your baby because you're breastfeeding and because you're needed for them. And because, you know, they have so many needs in those early few weeks that they need to sleep all the time, they need to nurse all the time, they need to be changed, they need to be comfortable, they need to be washed, etc., etc. That all you're doing as a mom in that first period of time is looking after your baby. And the amount of, I feel like people want to reject that. People want to say, hey, no, you know what? I'm free. I want to be free to do whatever I want 100% of the time, no matter what. And they don't see this greater purpose to the fact that you brought a life into the world and now you have to sustain it and nurture it and watch it grow until it can stand to be away from you for any period of time. That there is no, it's like this expectation that, hey, you're pregnant where a baby is literally inside you and then you give birth and now the baby is outside you. And the expectation is that these are like, there's a line in the sand that the moment you cross it, it's like, okay, now we're separate people. Now my baby is just a completely separate human being. He can just be away from me all the time. And obviously that's not the case. You can think of it as like a gradual line. It's like a wave, you know, when you're pregnant, the baby's literally inside you. And then when he's outside you, of course, he still needs to be super, super close to you all the time because that's what a baby needs. That's how the baby understands, hey, you know what, I still have a mom right here and I'm safe and I'm looked after and I'm comfortable. That's how they interact with the world in that first period of time. And so much of how women feel at this time and the anger they feel and the jealousy they feel and the resentment towards their husbands comes from this rebellion or this desire, this innate desire to rebel against this just fact of life and the fact of biology. And the fact that it happens during this time when you know it's temporary, you know that it's just going to be a few weeks or a few months or a few years. And then the shape of your life and the relationship that you have with your kid will completely change. And you will be able to go out for a drink when you want as well. Like it's not going to take that long. But being tied for just that short period of time is so hard for so many people. And I honestly believe that it comes from this complete lack of just understanding of reality and not being prepared for it, not understanding this is what it will look like. This is what your life will look like for a few weeks after you give birth, because you cannot go from being pregnant to having a baby out and expect that the distance that you can suddenly just have so much distance between you and your baby. That's not how that works. The transition is a much slower one. So at the very least, this person here was self-reflective enough that she understood that the reason she wanted to say no was because she was jealous. And then she also understood, hey, this is not a fair reason to try and stop my husband from doing things that he wants to do or that are good for him for whatever reason. And then the one person that I found in the comments who says, yes, you are being ridiculous. Seriously, one drink. He was away for a very short time. Exactly. A bunch of people do second her here. One person says, I agree, my baby is 10 days old and I told my husband to go to the bar for a bit. He's been super helpful and he deserves a break and some adult conversation. He was home within an hour or so and then proceeded to take the night shift so I could sleep because he felt refreshed. Like, it's great when people are actually working together and they're on the same page and they understand that being parents means making some sacrifices, but that being a couple also means you can help each other out and you can give each other time. And so I wish for more people that, especially when they have great husbands and great fathers, and when they feel like they're already supported, that instead of taking that out on them, taking out your frustration and your inability to accept and deal with and process the situation that you find yourself in, the change that you experience, and just adjusting to that, instead of taking out their frustration at that on their husband and becoming resentful, that you try to understand that this frustration is temporary, that your circumstances will change, that you're mostly rebelling against the change that's happening in your life, and all changes come with a period of growth. And the part of just being happy with your life from now on is accepting that there's a transition phase that you're going through right now and that you will get through it. You will get through it. It's not a big deal. Do not freak out if your amazing husbands do small things for themselves, and don't consider leaving, packing up, taking your babies and running away for these types of conflicts. They're really small conflicts. You should always look at them in the broader context of your life together. And it's really, really sad, really unfortunate if relationships break down because of small things like this. What a poor husband. Our next thread is titled, Trying to Push Discipline. Opie says, without going into a million details, how do you deal with an in-law that thinks physical punishment is acceptable when you do not? I'm at the point of not wanting to even see my father-in-law anymore. If my 4-year-old questions anything or doesn't listen immediately, my father-in-law loves to bring up that he whooped his kids with belts and he didn't have any issues with them. I am not a perfect parent by any means, but I would never whoop my son with a belt. I was whooped growing up, and while I am fine physically, I do not agree with it. When I tell my father-in-law that, then it turns into a rant about how younger people don't know how to raise kids, etc. I'm seriously at the point of not wanting to take my son around him. Any advice? Now, corporal punishment when it comes to children is something that I have very strong feelings about. I was also raised by parents who did whoop their kids, not with belts, but with other items if needed, which wasn't always the case. So under those, based on my experience as a child, I would say that I hated it so much, and it built such an intense level of resentment and rage towards my parents that even when I was like, I have very clear, distinct memories from when I was 7, 8 years old of writing my parents letters asking them not to hit me anymore. And so you can tell that my parents were generally speaking decent people, but they really, really developed this idea of the only way that you can discipline a child when they are young is by hitting them. And I fundamentally disagree with this method on just a very, very visceral level because of that experience, because I really understood exactly how it impacted me as a child and how that resentment and that rage never went away throughout the course of my entire life, pretty much. So even though I understand the urge and I understand why people do it and I know all the arguments for it and so on, I've always felt that it's wrong. It's just fundamentally wrong on a human level. And what I find especially interesting about how we've developed as a society when it comes to corporal punishment is that we think corporal punishment as a law enforcement technique, as a punishment that is acted out by the justice system, is completely wrong and evil and requires, like, you cannot imagine living in a free liberal society where corporal punishment is a thing, because it's just evil. It's like physical torture. Obviously there are countries in the world like Singapore and so on where they cane prisoners as part of the punishment that they go through when they are convicted of committing a crime. So we here think that this is just completely out there, and yet there are still a lot of people who believe that corporal punishment for kids and children is okay. When they are the weakest people, when they're the smallest people, that somehow it's acceptable in this kind of context. And I just don't get the logical disconnect between these two things. I don't understand why you would think it's okay to beat kids, but not okay to beat adults, when actually it would kind of make more sense to me the other way around. At least kids are, they're small, they're innocent. By small, I mean they are considerably weaker than anyone who would be doing the beating. And therefore, all you're doing is you're using your position of power and force and physical strength against a being or a person that is weaker than you, which kind of makes you a terrible human being. And they, generally speaking, for a 4-year-old, they do not have the capacity to understand, or at least to separate, the punishment part from the behavior part. If that makes sense. So if you sit down with a 4-year-old and you try to explain the concept of respect, to what extent will the 4-year-old actually understand what you mean by that? And then to what extent will they have enough self-control over the way that they interact with people to actually change their behavior? Yes, I believe that kids have a lot of capacity for a lot of good, and that they really can understand quite a lot when you sit down and you really talk to them about it. But as an adult, if the only way that you can express, hey, you shouldn't do X, is through physical violence, then you're already failing in your responsibility as an adult towards that child, which is to teach them about the world and to teach them how to engage properly with the world. And one of the ways that you should not be engaging, are not engaging properly with the world, as far as I'm concerned, is violence. If you want to teach your kids that this is not the right way to behave, then I don't know why you would ever do this. Now, I say all of this. This is one of those circumstances where I just always question when people are complaining about in-laws, where's the husband? I assume that if you're on the same page as your husband, then you've both made the decision together that you're not going to be using any kind of corporal punishment. Under those circumstances, the husband is perfectly capable of having a conversation with his dad and saying, hey, you know what? Can we just stay out of it? You know what? It's our decision how to discipline our child. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. I would not be having this conversation with my in-laws to that level of detail. I would maybe have it once. I would maybe have it twice. And then if they raised it any other time beyond that, I would just not engage with it at all. I would do something else. I wouldn't reply. I'd be like, hey, cool. I could just cut off the conversation and be like, there are other things that I need to do. I'm out. And that would be it. It would not even be a question for us. When she says, I'm coming to the point where I don't want to take my son around him, that's such involve your husband. Ask him to talk to his dad and be like, hey, you know what? I know you have a lot of feelings about this particular topic, but just keep them to yourself. We don't want to know. And I don't think that that's a big deal from that point onwards. Now, you will see here some comments which I really wanted to highlight. One person says, if he doesn't listen, kick him and say, oh, I thought you wanted me to whoop anyone who didn't listen to me. Now, obviously, people are sarcastic when they say this, but it does make the broader point of why do you think it's okay to hit kids but not adults? And she says, hey, I've thought about it, OP says here, but I have used that as an example with him. I asked him, would it be appropriate if he questioned his boss for them to whip him? And of course, his answer is no, but he thinks that it's totally fine for a 4-year-old. And that's really the part to me that's so evil about this. Why do you think it's okay to beat a 4-year-old? It's a 4-year-old. Why? This comment I also think is kind of hilarious. She says, disagreeing as in won't fall for one of grandpa's tall tales or having a tantrum. Either way, it's lazy parenting. But it's a good idea for you to have a gauge of what father-in-law believes is acceptable and disrespectful. And OP says, literally, if father-in-law is to ask my son to pick something up and my inquisitive 4-year-old asks why, he considers that disrespectful. A lot of the problem lies in that I wouldn't consider that disrespectful. My kids are allowed to ask me a question, but father-in-law thinks that kids are supposed to blindly listen to everything. And that's why you see really a fundamental mismatch in parenting styles. But one that I actually also think is just part of the generational gaps. So one generation thought that it was, kids were meant to be seen and not heard. They had to just sit there and be quiet and do as they were told. And a different generation thinks that kids can be heard and listened to. And we are definitely parts of that generation. What I actually find just completely blew my mind as a response to this one is this person says, a 4-year-old should know to do what you say when you ask them to do a simple task. Not with father-in-law on his disciplining philosophy or techniques, but I see his point on disrespect. Curious as to when you will expect your son to do as you say without him questioning your reasoning. Maybe the answer to that question will give you some ammo to open that line of dialogue with father-in-law. And so this is someone who does consider it to be disrespectful if you ask your son to do something and he goes, why? I find it so sad that so many people see kids being curious and inquisitive and wanting to explore the world and wanting to just learn things. And instead of wanting to engage with that and wanting to nourish that and wanting to just really be with their kids and meet them and follow them and try to enable them to have their interests and lives and develop their own perspective and experience of the world. Instead of wanting to be with your child there, you're just like, man, my kid should just do what I tell him to do, when I tell him to do it, and I should never have to explain myself. That, I think, is the definition of lazy parenting. I find it really sad for kids fundamentally that they are born with this just extreme level of openness. And yes, as parents, we are responsible for, making sure that they have a good grounding, a solid foundation, some grounding in reality, that they understand the rules of the world and how to engage with it, that they understand that there are certain ways that are good, certain ways of behaving that are good, and certain ways of behaving that are not so good, that they understand how to develop social interactions with other kids in their surroundings, and with adults. Like there are some basic rules that they need to learn in order to become adults, and we support them on that journey as adults. But there is a certain level of just an authoritarianism. There's this like authoritarian impulse where you just want to impose things on your kids. You want them to do things the way that you want them to do it. You want them to obey you when you want them to obey you. And honestly, I think that a big part of the struggle with kids is understanding that they are also people and they have their own perspectives, they have their own experiences. And if you have a certain level of respect and understanding towards your child and you treat them that way, then they will also calm down a lot, because they will feel like they are heard and that they are listened to and that they are respected. And then they will also engage with you in the exact same way. This is like how I feel fundamentally kids interact. And when things like tantrums happen, a lot of the time they happen because kids just are struggling to make their opinions heard, and they don't feel like they are in control of their own lives. And, much of the time they are not in control of their own lives because they're still children. But it's such a shame that comes out in these types of debates, that a lot of people will beat it out of a child if given the opportunity, just because dealing with it in any other way just takes a lot more time, a lot more energy. I would encourage everyone to look into topics like positive discipline and to learn exactly how you can still discipline your children. Just the whole wealth of information that is now available about disciplining kids that is so completely counter to everything that was done in the past with regards to things like this. A lot of these theories and a lot of the research that was done on this is actually also pretty old. So it's not that there weren't generations before us, or there weren't specific individuals, really great individuals in the generations before us who knew that there were better ways to discipline kids. For OP, just stop engaging with your father-in-law. You do not need to explain yourself. You can decide how to discipline your child without having a conversation about it with anyone else. And the final thread of the day is titled, "Does your husband or spouse take pictures of you?" OP says, "I go through my phone and I see hundreds of pics that I have taken of my husband and our kids, and I feel sad because I don't get the same from him. It's different when they're just random raw photos. I think he might have 2 to 3 photos that he took with me and the kids. All the rest are selfies that I've taken with me and the kids. I've told him my concerns and he says he will do it more, but he hasn't." Here is one. OP posts a picture here that I've hidden because I don't think it's good to display pictures from people. But in general, I find this I think people are just so different, and the things that they appreciate and the things that come to mind to them are just different. So some people are the types of people who'll be on their phone really often. When they see their kid doing something really exciting, they'll be like, "Oh my God, this is going to be a really cool picture." And it just occurs to them to do on a really natural level without them having to think very hard about it. And then other people are just not that type of person. So it often, very rarely, I would say, occurs to me to take a picture of my husband and our son together. I'm much more likely to just take a picture of my son when I think he's doing something particularly cute. And that's just how I do it. I think for my husband, it's kind of relatively similar. He's much more likely to take a picture of our son than he is to try and take a picture of us together. And I don't think that this is a big deal. I don't think it's something that I would be so sad about. I suspect, or at least how I would read this situation, I'd say that the wife here, OP, just feels a little bit sad that she's not documenting more of their life, that she wants a little bit, like, she wants to be able to look back and have that sense of nostalgia and reminiscing and just the positive reminders of the time that she spent with her kids a little bit more. I don't know how to encourage your husband to do it more, honestly, because I do, yeah, okay, you can ask for it. Then he says, yeah, sure. And I'm pretty sure that he intends, he means, yeah, sure, he will do it. But in the moment, it just doesn't occur to you. And I think that that's just a fundamental character trait. You can't quite change that about yourself. You'll see in a lot of the comments, people are like, hey, maybe once every 4 months. My husband is also a photographer, so once every 4 months with a photographer husband, and it still doesn't occur to him to take pictures. One person says, mine does, but it's always me sleeping with the kids. Usually my mouth is wide open and drooling. Which I think is not great. Like, I would want pictures where we both look good, but you know, that's just how it is. Next person says, mine doesn't at all, like never. And every time I see a picture of a woman with her children or baby, like just a candid spur of the moment picture that someone else took, it makes my heart ache, because I literally have none of my baby and I, or my pregnancy, that I didn't take myself. I hate it. Honestly, if I had that kind of feeling, I probably would invest in something like professional photo shoots. Whether you want to actually do a professional photo shoot or you want to hire a photographer that follows you around while you do just typical parenting things, and you get them to take pictures of you instead of just having a proper set that's designed and so on, that feels a little bit fake. I would just do that. And if I really, really cared so much and I had this feeling of like, it makes my heart ache, then I would do that for myself and I'd be happy about it. I don't think I would have that level of bitterness or anger towards my husband for it. One person says, yeah, my husband won't take pictures unless I ask. I don't ask often, so we have a limited number of them. And you'll see quite a lot of people like, nope, never. It's just not really common. It doesn't occur to him to do. I think that this whole obsession with pictures is a very recent one, and it is largely caused by social media, and it's the desire to be able to share pictures of yourself on social media that is coming out here. So it's this feeling of like, hey, you know what, look, I have such a great life. I really want to show off how awesome my kids are, how awesome our family is, how happy we are together. And I want to really save, you know, just have these snapshots of moments that I want to save and share and put out into the world with everyone around me. I think that that's where the urge comes from. I don't think you need to be super hyper dependent on your husband being that person. And I definitely wouldn't have it as a source of conflict in my relationship, because it's something that I think you can solve through other means, by having other members in your family take pictures of you with your kids, or by having professional photographers at different events, just so you have these moments where you're like, hey, now I have a few really great pictures. I find it a little bit performative to be so obsessed with pictures, but I also understand this desire to have something that you can look back on, you know, when you're 60, 70 years old, and you can be like, oh, this is how our kids looked back then. This is what we looked like back then. I think that that is the real magic of pictures, and where they're really useful. But then it's okay for most of the pictures to be ones that are taken by you. You know, it doesn't matter who took the picture then, because you're still reminiscing together, and it's still a family thing, family appreciation moment. All right, and that's all we've got time for today. If you have any comments about any of the topics that we covered today, feel free to leave them down below, and I will see you next time.